So one of the first things that we're going to be talking about today is a man by the name of Glenn Greenwald. Now, Glenn Greenwald rose to prominence a while back because he was one of the people entrusted with Edward Snowden's data leak. And yeah, so people associated him for a long time with kind of left-leaning positions, and Glenn was only too happy to kind of like embrace that characterization. But unfortunately, Glenn, well, I need to back up and provide a little bit more context. So, Glenn Greenwald is gay, and his husband is or was a senator in Brazil. He is a political figure in Brazil, who I believe was either arrested or threatened to be arrested by the Bolsonaro regime, which was virulently anti-LGBTQ. And additionally, Glenn was, I believe, at least for a time, supportive of the opposition leader, Lula da Silva, who was imprisoned unjustly by the Bolsonaro administration. Lula ran for president after being freed. He is now currently the president of Brazil. Lula is cool, and is also explicitly a socialist. Now, why am I bringing all this up? Well, Glenn Greenwald did something strange. After having moved back to the United States, he wound up kind of taking this right-wing pivot. It's very, very strange. And not only that, he is now doing things like going on Patrick Bet-David's podcast to talk about why Lula da Silva is extremely dangerous for Brazil, and not, the explicitly fascist Bolsonaro. Or as Dave Rubin would say, Bolsonaro. Yeah, you're in for a bad time when Patrick Bet-David is going to be around. Anyway, here he is shit-talking Lula on Patrick Bet-David's show. And, I haven't seen it yet, but just gonna preface this by saying Glenn Greenwald is a bad faith actor, and no one should take anything he says seriously. Here we go.
Brazil. You've lived. Are you still in Brazil, or
Yep,
you live?
yeah,
Okay.
yep.
So Brazil. I have an
there,
affinity
okay.
with Brazil. I named my daughter Ayrton Senna. You know how they view Senna over there. Senna's a race car driver. 1994. All the stories with him, what he did, beloved. With the day he died. I don't know if you've seen his document or if you haven't. You must watch it.
I know.
Emotional, right?
Yeah.
I relate to the guy and how he's wired. I relate how he wanted to, do what he did with the, corners he was taking, and how he said, you guys moved the tire. That's why I crashed. You guys moved, and then no, we never moved the tire. And he found that they moved the tire 2 inches is why he hit the tire. You know what story that is? When he went through one of the corners, he says, no, you guys screwed up. And they had to apologize to him. He says, because the tires I was going on practice was not the same. You moved it 2 inches. That kind of a guy on highways.
Wow.
Freaking maniacal. I love and how much he loved this country. So you live in Brazil. Operation Car Wash has been documented on God knows how much, what he's done. And, the $600 million, the one guy that was a super billionaire and goes from being a super billionaire to all of a sudden losing everything. And he goes to jail. And I've studied this whole thing, in the past. And then Bolsonaro, who he was, and then Lula, who he was, whose Lula's ties are, and how they viewed Lula. And you kind of came and did something kind of, you did some kind of an interview with Lula. He came down, sat down, and talked to you for about an hour and 20 minutes or something like that. What is your impression of Lula and Bolsonaro? And the reason why, assume Americans like, who is Lula in America? Is Lula a Bernie Sanders? Is Bolsonaro a Trump? Is Lula more of an Obama or a Biden? Who is Lula? Because there's a lot. This guy went to jail. He did a lot of stuff to steal money from the government based on stuff that's been documented. In your eyes,
Lula da Silva went to jail based on trumped-up charges by Bolsonaro, specifically to prevent him from winning the presidency. Like, as far as I know, there is no actual evidence that Lula stole money.
Is Lula a good guy? Is he a bad guy? Bolsonaro, is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? What do you think about these two characters?
So first of all, Lula's life story, you just have to acknowledge, no matter what your ideology is an inspirational life story. He was born into the deepest and most extreme form of poverty in a country where poverty means something different than it means in the United States. He was one of 9 children. He was illiterate until the age of 10. He got a job in a factory. He lost one of his fingers in a factory. He became a union leader. So he emerged from both poverty, union activism, and then became a hardcore political leftist. He was never really the kind of political leftist of, say, Castro or Hugo Chavez. In fact, he always tried to distance himself from that. He ran for president 3 times. Brazil came out of this dictatorship. That was the result of the CIA helping right-wing generals in 1964 overthrow a democratically elected government. They imposed a dictatorship for 21 years that was brutal. And when it re-democratized in 1985, Lula became a national figure. He ran for president 3 times, lost all 3 times because of the perception that he was too leftist for Brazil. The elite was aligned against him. In 2002, he understood that in order for him to win, he needed to become a more moderated figure, not just a kind of pretend moderated figure, but an actually moderated figure. He chose as vice president this highly respected entrepreneur and banker who was a billionaire or something close to it. And when he got into office, he began essentially accommodating the financial elite and the financial sector. Under Lula's first 2 terms, from 2002 to 2010, Brazil's economic growth was explosive. It went from something like the 15th largest economy in the world to the 6th largest economy in the world. It surpassed the UK. Everybody got richer. The rich got richer. He was able to take a lot of that national wealth, distribute it to programs that gave a guaranteed monthly payment to people who couldn't feed their children, that level of poverty. He created opportunities for poor people to go to college for the first time. There were good things that his government did. Brazil, at the same time, never got out of the systemic corruption that was the result of that dictatorship. So the way that you get votes is you have to pay people off. The way that you get anything done politically is you move money around. All the Brazilian politicians have huge amounts of Swiss bank accounts that have been hidden and finally discovered. And Lula and his party, PT, were very much a part of that because they were running the political system. So Lula himself will tell you, and I've done several interviews.
I wonder which party is more corrupt. The one that directly caters to the wealthiest people in Brazil and their companies, or the one that caters to the working people. I wonder which one is more corrupt. I wonder which one has more money to throw around. Interesting to think about.
Interviews with him, including when he was in prison, and he will tell you that his party has always been one of grave corruption. What happened was and by the way, he's probably the most talented politician.
Oh, you kidding me?
There's no person who can move crowds the way
Obama said
Lula
that
can.
about him. He said he's one of the best politicians out there.
When he left
Great
office
communicator.
in 2010, he had an 86% approval rating. You're talking about pluralistic democracy because everybody got richer. And not, obviously a lot of that is luck. A lot of it has to do with international commodity prices, things the president doesn't control. But the president gets credit when the economy does well. The economy did very well, and he left office with that kind of popularity. When his chosen successor, who was Dilma Rousseff, who was actually a communist guerrilla, she picked up arms. She went to prison to fight the dictatorship. When commodity prices collapsed, the economy in Brazil collapsed. They saw an opportunity to get rid of that party finally. They impeached her in 2016, and then in 2017, this anti-corruption probe, car wash, the biggest anti-corruption probe in Brazil's history, one of the biggest in the world, started putting into prison billionaires and some of the country's most powerful politicians. And I was a supporter of it at the start, like a lot of people were. It started to become clearly politically motivated. They were aimed at certain figures and certain parties and kind of protecting the center-right the parties with which they had an ideology. They started to become put under suspicion. In 2019, I had a source who hacked into the phones of the leading judges and prosecutors, including the ones who presided over Lula's conviction. He was leading all public opinion polls in 2017, 20 points ahead of Bolsonaro, 25 points ahead of Bolsonaro into the 2018 race. They took him, they put him into prison, they convicted him on these corruption charges, rendered him ineligible. Bolsonaro ran without having to get past Lula, and he got elected. In 2019, right at the start of the Bolsonaro presidency, I got this gigantic archive.
So far, this is actually not a terrible summation of events. Just that he's kind of leaving out the key detail that, like, the targeting of Lula was directly political. I mean, he's not saying it wasn't, but
that proved the whole time the judge was plotting with political actors, with the prosecutors, essentially using corrupt methods in order to fight corruption. When we exposed it, it required a nullification of Lula's conviction. He was able to leave prison as a result of the reporting we were doing. That's the reason why there was so much anger and hostility toward me from the Bolsonaro movement, because they finally got Lula in jail and our reporting forced his release. Lula runs for president in 2022, defeats Bolsonaro by a tiny margin. Same issue with Trump. The whole establishment united against Bolsonaro, had all the challenges of COVID. He's still almost...
Man. Yeah, the poor, you know, hard-pressed Bolsonaro regime that did a soft coup by putting Lula in prison. Yeah, okay, bud. All right.
Almost won.
What was he charged with? I believe he was charged with money laundering. Yeah, March 2016, Lula questioned for 3 hours as part of a fraud inquiry. His house was raided by federal police agents. He denied allegations of corruption. Police said that they had evidence against him, that he had received kickbacks. And, weird. Yeah, he was convicted of accepting bribes worth $1.2 million. However, yes. Yeah, obviously his conviction was overturned. Because, you know, they didn't have evidence.
They had their own January 6th moment as well.
Their own January 6th moment, exactly because Bolsonaro claimed that his loss was due to fraud. Bolsonaro, over the years, he was this backbencher. He had made a lot of statements like, I don't really believe in democracy. I think Pinochet was a great guy. The only thing Pinochet did wrong was he didn't kill more communists in the country. He made a lot of
yeah, who can say? You know, this guy who supported a fascist dictatorship, or you know, he's really the oppressed guy here. What are you saying, Glenn?
A lot of statements that were very disturbing. I viewed Bolsonaro as a real threat. When he got into the presidency, the entire establishment aligned against him, like they did with Trump, and began using...
Yeah, probably because they recognized him correctly as a fascist threat. Like, yeah, that's probably why.
Using anti-democratic methods to defeat the Bolsonaro movement, censoring, imprisoning political enemies, just like they were doing with Trump, and I became an outspoken opponent of the...
Wait, as soon as Bolsonaro got into office, the establishment started imprisoning enemies of Bolsonaro? Or started imprisoning Bolsonaro's support? Nah, this is just... Okay, Glenn has now transitioned into the part of the podcast where he's just going to lie nonstop. That is what has happened here. Took us 8 minutes to get here, but which is longer than I would have expected. But from here on out, this is going to be lies and nonsense in support of a fascist regime.
The things that were being done against Bolsonaro and against his movement, obviously changed where I stood politically. Suddenly the Bolsonaro movement saw me a lot more favorably. The left began to turn on me and view me as an enemy. Bolsonaro ended up as a very weak president. Lula is a very weak president because Brazil is run by this kind of very corrupt centrist class that's transactional in nature. There's not a lot that presidents can do. One of the things I like about Lula is he's a very outspoken defender of Julian Assange. He is, constantly demanding the persecution of Assange stop. He refuses to get Brazil involved in the war in Ukraine, saying we don't have a war with Russia, we have a war with poverty and inequality, and we're going to use our resources not to feed a NATO war, but to try and help Brazil. If you ask me, is Lula corrupt? My answer would be, I want to see a fair trial, not a trial filled with corruption. There's certainly evidence to suggest that he was part of the systemic corruption. Bolsonaro.
Oh, is there? Well, then, please do elaborate. Oddly enough, I don't think Glenn is going to elaborate on that. Yeah, liar mode activated.
Bolsonaro, though, too, by the way, every one of Bolsonaro's sons is a political elected official. They all ran for Senate and Congress and won in the Bolsonaro name. And they all have $6 million mansions and huge amounts of personal wealth that is very difficult to account for. I think.
Yeah, weird how you're backloading all of this, isn't it? Weird to backload all of this, huh?
I think Bolsonaro and his family also have a lot of evidence that they too are involved in corruption. To me, neither Bolsonaro nor Lula is the relevant problem in Brazil. The problem in Brazil is that you have a court that has seized all power. The censorship regime in Brazil makes the United States look like this bastion of liberty and freedom. And at the same time, you have these corrupt factions in Brazil that continue to run Brazil to the detriment of 90% of the population. And so I've seen...
Yeah, and which politicians are bought and paid for the most by those people? Glenn? It's probably the one who has his entire family involved in politics inexplicably, despite any amount of skill on their part, and who all inexplicably have $6 million+ mansions and just have seemingly endless amounts of cash that they pull out of their ass. It's probably that one. Probably not the guy who was convicted without evidence of having taken $1.2 million in bribes. Probably not that guy. Probably not that guy. I have no doubt that on some level, like, just playing politics, like political baseball in Brazil, requires, like, bribes to get things done. That is not an uncommon feature of democracies that have been hijacked by capitalism in particular. But I have a feeling, as in the United States, one party is getting paid an awful lot more money to be vocally in favor of the special and moneyed interest of Brazil. And I don't think it's the party of Lula da Silva, the guy who lost a finger because of the poor and horrendous working conditions imposed by capitalists. I don't think it's that guy. I don't think it's the guy who spent his entire life fighting against capitalist corruption. I don't think it's that guy at all, actually.
Bolsonaro nor Lula, neither as villains or heroes. They're almost ancillary figures more than they are central figures to Brazilian politics.
When I talk to some friends there, the way they describe Lula is like criminal at the highest level, corrupt, politician, stealing money from the people. He had a meeting with Castro. Didn't Castro have a meeting at like 83 years old? Castro was an emotional meeting with Bolsonaro years ago. It's like 13 years ago.
Lula maintained positive relations with Hugo Chavez, with Maduro, with Castro, but at the same time...
It's kind of weird, don't you think?
I don't think it's weird to have relations with some of the most important leaders of the most... I mean, Venezuela is a country with enormous oil reserves.
Totally get it, yeah.
Joe Biden meets with the head of Saudi Arabia, who is as repressive as anything that Hugo Chavez ever did or that Fidel Castro did. We have a long history of supporting tyrannical governments. I'm not trying to defend Lula or I'm not trying to defend Bolsonaro. There's huge political polarization. The Brazilian right sees Lula the way the American left.
I'm not trying to defend I'm not trying to defend Lula or Bolsonaro, says Glenn Greenwald in a video titled Why Lula is Extremely Dangerous for Brazil.
Sees Trump, and at the same time, the Brazilian left wants Bolsonaro in prison and is well on their way to putting Bolsonaro in prison. They've already made him ineligible to run without even convicting him, and I think a lot of those methods are anti-democratic as well.
For me, when I see stuff like that happening, and Brazil being the great people that they have there, and you saw a similar thing where now Bolsonaro can't go there. They have a guy at the top who's the one that everybody fears. Is he the attorney general who looks like a bad? He just looks like a guy that imprisons everybody.
He's the
wait. Bolsonaro can go there. It's just that he's wanted for crimes if he goes there. So like, he fled the country. Like that is how much he is hated there. For all of the crimes.
What's
Judge,
his name? He's
Alexandre de Moraes.
Yeah, that's right there. Pull up his picture and see what he looks like.
That is a real tyrant. That guy is a real tyrant.
Well, whose side is he on? He's more on Lula than he is with Bolsonaro.
The funny thing is in 2017 when he was nominated for the Supreme Court, the left hated that guy. Look, he looks like a
villain from a X-Men.
The stuff this guy's done.
This guy.
But by the way, what they're complaining about right now, right? So in 2023. The Supreme Court Judge Alexandre de Moraes ordered Bolsonaro to submit himself for questioning with the federal police over the storming of the Congress. He was ordered to report and, be interviewed by police because his supporters stormed the congressional buildings in an attempt to overthrow the election results. And that is actually a crime, you see. So they wanted to see if he had indeed done a crime. And oddly enough, I don't believe he actually submitted himself for questioning. Or maybe he did. Let me look that up. I'll fact check that one. Questioned. Yes. Here we go. He has indeed been questioned. Oh, interesting. This is actually from 2 days ago. Brazil's Bolsonaro questioned on gifts of jewelry and watches from Saudi Arabia while in office. You might be like, oh, well, how bad could that be? I mean, it's just jewelry and a watch. Brazilian federal police questioned former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro on Thursday about attempting to sneak in diamond jewelry worth reportedly $3 million and the sale of 2 luxury watches he received as gifts from Saudi Arabia while in office. Just got caught sneaking millions of dollars of gems into Brazil, and oddly enough, the amount that they caught him with was actually several times more than the amount that they accused Lula da Silva for taking. That's crazy. That's crazy. Aside from Bolsonaro, police also questioned his wife Michelle, 2 lawyers, former aide Lieutenant Colonel Mauro Cid, Cid's father Osmar Crivellati, and Marcelo Câmara, the officer said. The simultaneous sessions were reportedly designed to prevent the individuals from exchanging information on the line of questioning. According to local media, Bolsonaro and his wife Michelle chose to remain silent. The outlets cited the couple's lawyers, who did not respond to several requests for comment. Wow, that's crazy. Oh, hey, earlier this month, federal police raided the homes and offices of several people purportedly involved in the jewelry case, and several people purportedly involved in the jewelry case alleged Bolsonaro received nearly $70,000 for the sale of 2 luxury watches gifted from Saudi Arabia. Yeah. I'm sure. I'm sure. Also, they said, "Oh, well, this judge is a monster because they're preventing Bolsonaro from running again." Yeah. Until 2030. Because he tried to overthrow the 2022 election in Brazil. There are actually consequences for that in Brazil. So he's barred from running for 8 years. But they're not acting like it's forever. They're acting like it's forever in this segment. It's not. Also, Bolsonaro can appeal the decision, so we'll see. We'll see how that shakes out. All of these activist judges that were appointed by Bolsonaro. Money laundering, you say? Yeah, I do say.
This guy is scary. There are very few people willing to criticize Alexandre de Moraes. I've been using my platform nonstop to warn about the dangers that he poses to Brazilian liberty.
You feel safe with this guy there?
No, I don't.
I'm surprised he hasn't come after you yet.
The reason he wants to, believe me, the reason he can't is I accepted a contract with Brazil's largest newspaper, which is like the New York Times of Brazil, to kind of insulate myself further. Obviously, I have an international platform. When Brazilian prosecutors tried to indict me and prosecute me for the work I did, there became an international scandal.
This guy.
No, this guy is a fanatic.
I just kind of wanted to see where you're at.
No, this is the guy who is responsible.
Some say he runs Brazil.
He runs Brazil, even though he's a single member of the court. No one has elected him.
Wow.
And he is a despot and a fanatic in the purest sense of.
Yes. As we all know, unelected judiciaries are the source of authoritarian rule. We've only had an unelected judiciary branch in America for the last 300 years. So guess we've been under an authoritarian regime the entire time. Yep. Okay. Anyway.
What he will do is he issues orders when he wakes up in the morning, ordering people banned off the internet. There's this guy. He's currently in Miami now. You should talk to him, actually, if you haven't met him. He was like the Joe Rogan of Brazil. He modeled his
Constantino Rafael.
Monarchy is his name.
Okay.
He modeled his show after Joe Rogan. He has 4-hour shows. He drinks. He smokes weed during the show. He became the most popular podcaster in Brazil.
Oh man, if he drinks alcohol and smokes weed, he must have good political opinions. What are you talking about, Glenn?
Brazil, every politician left and right was begging to get on his show. He went on his show. He was a little bit drunk. He was asked when he said he was an absolutist, free speech absolutist, if that means even that the government should allow a Nazi party to exist. And he said, yeah, of course, even the Nazi party should be able to exist like it does in the United States. They called him a Nazi. YouTube kicked him off. His career was destroyed. He went to Rumble. He has a show on Rumble. And now that judge, that fanatic that you just put on the screen, has ordered Monarch off Rumble.
I saw that.
Has fined him. Has opened a criminal investigation. That's why he's in the United States, because he fears being arrested. The only thing that he has done is question the integrity of the 2022 election, questioned a lot of the orthodoxies of COVID. Without any trial, that judge has silenced what had been the most popular. It would be like saying Joe Rogan is not permitted to use the internet.
Totally, but to me, this is why I'm very curious, because some would say you helped Lula. When you talk to him, it's like, oh, okay, maybe this, because the guy that people trust, they trust you. So when you're doing something and you say something good about a guy. But a lot of people in Brazil say this is the guy why Lula got, he was able to drop the charges so Lula could run against Bolsonaro, because they felt like he was the guy that was the most formidable guy to beat Bolsonaro, and he did. So
I'll tell you what actually happened. And it's an interesting story because it's repeating itself in the United States and in the EU. when they put Lula in prison in 2017,
Yeah.
the reason they did it, the establishment did it, was because they always wanted a center-right, kind of like a Mitch McConnell, Paul Ryan type. That's their dream to run Brazil. And the only way they thought they could do that was by destroying Lula and his party. What they got instead was Bolsonaro. So they kind of got the monster that they feared most. And when Bolsonaro got into office, they realized they feared Bolsonaro way more than they feared Lula because he was a much bigger enemy of
He's
the
anti-establishment.
establishment. No, exactly. So this guy here was an enemy of the left. The left hated him. They called him a racist and a fascist and all the things the left calls people when they dislike him. And then what happened was the Supreme Court, the establishment, realized there was only one person who had any chance to beat Bolsonaro, and that was Lula. They used our reporting as the pretext to let Lula out of prison and to render him eligible.
Just very interestingly, the guy that they're talking about, Monarch, I guess he goes by. Let's see. He was in conversation with Parliament members Tabata Amaral and Kim Kataguiri. Amaral pushed back, saying that freedom of expression ends when your expression puts another's life at risk. And she said that Nazism puts the Jewish population at risk. Monarch defended his stance, adding to his previous statement that he believes if someone wants to be anti-Jew, they should have the right to be. And also, again, his previous statement was that the country should recognize a Nazi party by law, which, by the way, is a bit different than, you know, a Nazi party should be allowed to exist. He's asking for actual legislation to recognize a neo-Nazi party in Brazil. So, interesting way to kind of, like, advocate for this guy, Glenn. Later in the episode, Kataguiri added fuel to the fire, saying he was against the criminalization of Nazism in Germany. Monarch posted an apology video on Twitter on Tuesday, claiming he was very drunk and he hopes people will be understanding. However, he didn't seek apology for the idea. The incident did not die down. Also on Tuesday night, Adries Jorge, a prominent TV commentator and leading supporter of right-wing President Jair Bolsonaro, drew scrutiny after making a Nazi salute at the end of the debate about Monarch's podcast on the Jovem Pan TV show, in which he defended the show host, Kataguiri. So, you know, Jewish groups in Brazil have been worried about the resurgence of Nazi rhetoric since Bolsonaro rose to power. In defense of his reluctance to shut down his country to reduce COVID-19 cases, Bolsonaro employed the expression, "work sets you free," which many felt trivialized a phrase associated with Auschwitz. Bolsonaro supporters have also been known to make Nazi salutes, including at rallies supporting the president. One of his aides was accused of flashing a white supremacist hand signal during a legislative hearing. Yeah. Okay. Cool stuff. Anyway, good job, Glenn. Defending the good guys here.
Eligible to run again. Look, my reporting was truthful. I can't help the fact that the judge and the prosecutors who oversaw Lula's conviction did corrupt and illegal things. That's my job to reveal it and not to hide it. It's not my fault that Lula ended up winning. They let Lula out of prison because they knew only Lula could defeat Bolsonaro.
Dangerous guy, right?
That guy is. Let me tell you.
Well, they let him out of prison because they didn't have evidence. That's why they let him out of prison.
Something.
He's a very dangerous
I've been a
guy.
journalist for 20 years. I obviously have done a lot of journalism that has been risky, has been dangerous, whatever. There's never been a time, not ever in my life, when I thought to myself, I want to criticize this political official, but in the back of my mind, I'm a little bit worried about the dangers of doing so. Maybe I shouldn't do it. The only time that thought has entered my mind was when I decided to go on a public crusade against him, because he has no limits on what he will do.
He hasn't come after you yet?
Not yet, but they're
There's no limits on what this guy will do. Also, notice that that's where the pull quote comes from. The pull quote on this video is about Alexandre de Moraes, not Lula da Silva, and yet the video uses no limits on what he will do as the quote preceding why Lula is extremely dangerous for Brazil. But also, not only that, I love that the follow-up question is literally, has he come after you yet? And the answer is just awkward pause. Not yet. Yeah, okay, bud.
Are you going to stay in Brazil?
I'm going to stay in Brazil, and I'm going to continue to be the leading voice against Alexandre de Moraes because I'm the one who has the
he's going to come after you, though. He kicked a bunch of guys out. He kicked the former president's son out, saying you can't come back to Brazil anymore.
Look, my kids are Brazilian.
Figueiredo, what's his name? Figueiredo.
Paula Figueiredo. But there's a big difference between doing that to Brazilian activists and doing it to me. And so I feel like I have the obligation with this platform to use it because if I don't, who's going to?
Be safe out there,
Respect.
bro. Yeah. Pat, what are the chances that you're going to invite our friend Glenn and this guy Marias to crustaceans in L.A.?
You're funny.
Also, just to note, I don't believe Jair Bolsonaro's son has been kicked out of Brazil. That I think is just not true. So yeah. It's almost like it's all lies.
Yeah,
no, but you know what it is when you're saying this. Like, I would love to go to Russia and sit down with Snowden, have a conversation with him, and I would love to go have a conversation with Putin as well. Obviously, I'd love to talk to him. But we approached Maduro to go to Venezuela to interview him because I wanted to talk to Maduro at the peak. Maduro and who was the guy that was going up against him that's now in Colombia? Juan Guaido. Juan Guaido, yeah. Yeah, just to learn what's the reasons behind this stuff that's going on.
So if you like this clip and you want to watch another one, click right here.
God, Glenn Greenwald is such a waste of air. Are you calling Glenn a liar? Yep. Yes, I am. And I have finished my makeup. My eyebrows are a little bit uneven. Maybe I'll try and fix that a bit. Good enough. You look good? Thank you. I will be right back. Just need to wash some makeup off my hands. And yeah, then we will we'll move on. But to finish up some finishing thought here. Glenn Greenwald is full of shit. He is a deliberately manipulative little weasel. And I have no doubt he knows a lot about Brazilian politics. That's not what I dispute. I dispute his presentation of those politics. I dispute his motivations when talking about these politics. And I think that he is pretty transparently... I don't know if he's doing it solely for the money, but, like, he has a deliberate agenda. And I'm not sure where that agenda is coming from. I don't think it's his desire to, like, uncover the truth or whatever. I don't believe that. I think he's a weaselly little liar who has been doing what is most politically convenient for his career for a very long time. And I think that has just taken him in strange and weird directions that have no undergirding political or moral values. Which is why he waves, he's waving like a flag, like a paper bag in the wind. He's just left to the right. Yeah, who cares? It doesn't matter because ultimately all he cares about is, being lifted up as much as possible.